Hi, my name is Katie Weatherup and I'm a shamanic practitioner in San Diego, California. And I want to make this recording to help support people with tools that are very affordable and very accessible to support you when you're in the middle of a healing crisis or a healing journey or some kind of transformation. And this is particularly relevant to my work. I work with a process called soul retrieval and shamanic healing, and that creates intervention at the soul level, which is the blueprint for the individual. It's the part of you that exists before you're born into this physical form and will continue on after your death. And it's a very core level of work. When you create energetic interventions and shifts and changes and healings there, whether it's soul retrieval of getting back parts, or whether it's clearing imprints or releasing your soul of that vow of poverty that seemed like a good idea 5 lifetimes ago, or the pain of traumatic events, all of these kind of things create this incredible change that ripples outward because the soul is the foundation and the blueprint. So moving up to the energetic body, there's shifts and changes. This creates change in the physical body, often toward health and healing and alignment. It can create change in the emotional and mental matrices, and it can create a lot of change in your life circumstances. And I think that shamanic work and other forms of healing, so this video isn't limited to only if you have a soul retrieval or only if you do shamanic work. It's actually intended for any kind of healing work that you engage in or major life change or shift. So all of these things, it's wonderful. I love the power of shamanic healing. It's called the path of lightning, which means we're creating this incredible, powerful, profound, deep, rapid change. And it can also be considered to be, well, it's the path of lightning, not the path of comfort. And while I always set intent that any healing work I do be gentle and appropriate and check in with people's guides for the right level of what they can integrate, it's not the most comfortable way to approach healing because of the speed of transformation. Because if somebody is open and they have practices that keep them flexible and available on a lot of different levels, change can ripple very rapidly through. And so I want to provide some suggestions for ways that you can support yourself and ease some of the discomfort. And one of the things to think about in the concept of healing is if you cut your arm, there'll be all of these reactions and all of these experiences while the cut heals. So there might be pain in the beginning, and there might be itchiness when it scabs over, and tenderness later, and then eventually you have new skin, and it's all strong and resilient. And these are wonderful things. But if you imagine that you condense that process of a cut healing in a few days into a much, much shorter period of time, that period of time might be rather acute and rather intense. And so I'm drawn to my healing work because I have a great passion for alleviating suffering. And so I want to help people not suffer when they're integrating deep healing and to have some really good tools to support them. So one of the things that you can do if you're interested in embarking on a healing path is make sure that there aren't other layers where you're blocking where the healing work could integrate. So if I could do a fantastic soul retrieval for someone, get all their parts back, but if they're absolutely determined to hold on to their victim story and nobody is going to stop them, and they, spend every single day thinking about how their ex did them wrong, and if you're stuck in that, that's okay. I can help you shift that. But if that's become part of your identity and someone isn't interested in shifting that, then no amount of healing work is going to come past their free will that's holding them in this really rigid place. So one of the things that you can do to make yourself available to spontaneous healing and movement is to do things that create flexibility and create the ability to move. So one of the things that's really helpful is moving your body. I'm a big fan of things that move your life force energy really dynamically along with your physical body. So Tai Chi, Qigong, certain kinds of breath work are really, really good. I'm not actually a fan of things like Kundalini yoga for the most part. A little bit of it is okay in certain people, but it's counterindicated for a lot of my clients. And part of that is that it can force the energy to rise so quickly and so dynamically that it can cause some pretty severe dissociation, and it can be really hard to come back from. So when I'm talking about doing yoga, it's like nice balance styles like Hatha yoga. I'm a fan of gentle. You know, a lot of practices are pretty extreme, so you don't need to go into the desert and fast for days. You know, the vibration has really risen, spirit is very accessible, it's very easy to tap in, so we don't need to be harsh with our bodies in order to be able to move energy. But something that creates a healthy flow and movement, even, you know, just taking a walk outside, can really help energy be able to flow and healing to be able to be integrated. So gentle movement, movement with intention, things like Qigong, time out in nature, these are all things that help the energy to move. It's also really good to help your emotional matrix to move. Sometimes when people go through too much pain or emotion or intensity or a breakup that, you know, is with somebody you've been with for a lot of lifetimes, the feelings run really crazy deep and it's really hard. So I'm a fan of a practice called fire ceremony, because you can get the fire to process the excess of emotions on your behalf and begin dismantling the matrix of energy. So this is really good for self-judgment, for ways that you beat up on yourself, for emotions like, I really don't want to be holding a grudge against my mother, but I find that I am nonetheless. I just can't get over that thing she did when I was 5. And I don't want to be holding on to that. If you're in that kind of struggle, fire ceremony can really help you out and support you. And on the articles page of my website at handsoverheart.com is a video showing you how to do fire ceremony. It's necessary to do more than once, so fire ceremony is most effective as a repeated practice until you've dismantled the energy that you're wanting to dismantle. So that's a very, very powerful way to support yourself. I'm a fan of things that move energy on our behalf so we don't have to work so hard. And so one of the ironic things about healing a really deep soul wound is you're going to be most uncomfortable at the point where the energy is almost completely cleared out of you. So if I do some really deep healing work on somebody and I move something that's been really heavy and painful, that's been held deep in their soul for many lifetimes, there's this spontaneous release of other places where toxic energy has been held. And so anybody who's ever done a fast, even if it was just for, you know, for a day, may have noticed that one of the things they talk about is you can get flu-like symptoms because your body's like, oh, this is great. I have some space where I'm not working so hard on digesting food. I can start to release some of the accumulated toxins. And so you actually, in this clearing process, can feel more uncomfortable. And there's a similar thing that happens with the energetics. When we move toward health, there's an opportunity for weight and density to move to the surface and clear out. We have the most energetic sensitivity right at the surface of our auric field. And the reason is that whether you're super conscious of energy or you're really not, either way I find that people use the outer edges of their auric field to sense the energy around them. It's really good to have the piece of information if somebody is really toxic or mentally ill or, you know, projecting a lot of stuff. You know, people are sensitive to those kind of things when people's energy is not very comfortable, and it gives us important safety cues. So I might have a lot of compassion for somebody who's you know, really chewing on their judgment and projection, but I might want to back away from them while they're working that out so that I don't become the projection screen. It's uncomfortable at best and dangerous at worst. So we're very acutely able to sense at the edge of our auric field, just like our fingertips have a lot more ability to sense sensation than we feel in our deep organs. And the reason is there's just a lot of information like stop touching the hot thing that's useful, whereas deep in our organs we don't need as much sensory input. We have some, but it's not nearly as intense as other places on our body. And so when we have a healing experience and we begin to detox out some of these heavy layers, it can actually feel most uncomfortable right at the end of the healing process, right when we're just almost completely free of something we've carried for a really long time. And so practices like salt baths and salt scrubs in the shower are really helpful. I find that I release a lot in the dream times, so a lot of times I'll put a rock under my bed, and I don't pick a crystal because, you know, like a quartz crystal is very activating. Instead I pick something like obsidian or granite. This can be an ordinary rock you pick up on a hike where you tune in and say, show me a rock that, you know, wants to come home and support me in this way. Maybe not on a long hike because rocks are heavy to carry back, but what I do is I'll put it under my bed for a few days. Sometimes it's one night, sometimes it's a week. It just depends on how rapidly I feel like I'm shedding layers at any given time. And then the rock can absorb the layers that I'm releasing, and then I pick it up with a cloth because I don't want to, you know, reintegrate the energy that's been released into it, and take it outside and thank it and set it on the ground and just ask that the earth transmute the energy that's been released. And then I put a different rock under my bed, and you can have several that you cycle, or I have a lot of rocks, so I have a lot that I change between. But I find that helps me get deeper, restful, more grounded sleep, because sometimes in the dream time the energy can really bounce around. I'm a huge fan of something that's called a decoupling. There's information about that on my website, but it's an energetic intervention to turn off the fight or flight response, because when we're going through this kind of intense change, it's very easy for our instincts to get activated. There's an ego death in any kind of healing or giving up of something, so there's a part of us, even if it's such a good supportive plan, where a part of us freaks out, who will I be if I stop doing that? Who will I be? And it's not necessarily something that moves through our mind consciously. We can just end up feeling this sort of unexplained resistance to change. And I like to treat that resistance to change really lovingly and gently, because it really is my instincts trying to save my life. My instincts are really freaked out about the fact that I'm on the path of lightning. They don't like it. I'm creating all this change. I never know what I'm going to do next because I'm following the pulse of where's my hell yes? What's alive for me? What's my truth of this moment? And so there's a lot that moves dynamically, and there's a lot of me that, you know, kind of likes things to stay the same. You know, I'm one of those people who cry when I move because it's just hard not to have my roots into the ground, not to have my sense of place. So knowing that, I'm just extra gentle with my instincts. I do a lot of sort of self-soothing and calming them. I do the decoupling to turn off the fight or flight response, because even if the change is positive, the instincts are still just freaked out, like, what I've done so far has worked to survive, so let's not mix it up, is kind of the message of the instinct. Let's stay with what we know works. Let's not go crazy places. And so there's a lot of self-soothing that I do. I'm a fan of all different kinds of smudging. I like Palo Santo a lot. You can use sage, sweetgrass, a lot of incenses, essential oils. These are all really great things that can just help take the burden of you having to wade through all this stuff and use something from the outside to clear it. Clearing with sound is really beautiful. I have singing bowls. I love using those. There are lots of options, but the idea is just working with yourself to keep the energy clear and working with yourself to be really gentle. One of the things that's important when you're going through a real deep healing is compassion with yourself about going in. So I think it's the awesomest thing in the world that when I do a soul retrieval for someone, everything reorganizes around, you know, this new health and power and the parts of them that they lost that they got back. Wow, that's so awesome. And at the same time, you could think of it as like a remodel. Like if you're remodeling your kitchen, you will not have happy contractors if you tell them that, you know, they should take out the cabinets and change out the stove and put down new tile and do all these things that are going to give you this beautiful and functional kitchen that really serves, you know, really serves you and supports you. But every day at 6 o'clock it needs to be fully functional so you can cook a full meal. You know, they'll say, no, forget it, you know, lady, you're out of your mind, no way we're doing that for you. Or it will cost a lot more and it will certainly take a lot longer. And a lot of people have this expectation that they can go through a major healing that results in a reorganizing of all layers, including life circumstances, and still be like fully functional in the world, like, you know, still keep these crazy schedules. I don't know about other places, but Americans seem to have this particularly crazy idea of how much we can fit in a day, and a lot of people are out of balance between the yin, the stillness, and the yang and the active and doing. And so being able to recognize that a lot of your life force energy is going internal to integrate and rewire and remodel, and that you just won't have as much, passion and creativity and excitement about going and doing things. So consider pushing your edge a little bit for the things you know really will support you. A gentle walk outside, obviously continuing to feed your children and your pets is very important. But there may be house cleaning things that you give yourself a pass on for a little while, or projects that you're interested in starting that you're just like, well, I'll get to that. So really considering like what are the bare bones, what absolutely needs to get done, focusing on practices that really support you will really streamline the downtime so that it's minimized. If you need extra sleep, it's really healing and wonderful to take that. So being gentle with yourself about having a crazy schedule when you've had a deep healing can be really helpful. And some people, it's the other way around. They get really energized and they're like, wow, I'm ready to take on the world. This is so awesome. I'm no longer leaking from all these places because we've cleaned up this stuff. This is awesome. I have tons of energy. And that's great when it happens. But if you do need to go into stillness, honoring that is really, really good. There's some practices and materials that I really like for creating flexibility in your mind. So one of the things that will most block healing in my experience is when people are really stuck in judgment. And the thing is, it's almost like, asking people to point to judgment is almost like asking a fish to describe water. It's so pervasive in our society. Even like the news or a comedy that you watch, everything is oriented toward good, bad, right, wrong, and there are all these underlying messages about that. So it's quite radical and quite an intensive process to begin to be neutral mind about things in the world. And so I find Byron Katie work is really helpful for this. I like Pema Chodron's Tong Lin. This is another really, really super helpful practice. I'm a huge fan of Debbie Ford's The Dark Side of Light Chasers. It works with shadow work because the whole underlying thing of getting out of judgment is that you can look at yourself with kind eyes. And all of these people, Byron Katie, Pema Chodron, Debbie Ford, are all talking about this idea of unconditional friendliness toward yourself. And that allows you to then be unconditionally friendly toward other people, and instead of using judgment to sort people, you can use boundaries and choice. So I have a value around reliability, and I have a value around being in my authentic yes. And so when I need to change an agreement with someone, my value is to pay attention to the ripples I may have had and go back to the drawing board with the person and see if we can find a new win-win. And that works really well for me. But somebody who's like, you gave your word, you keep it no matter what, absolutely no change, no flexibility, we're not going to be a super good match, because I may need to say, look, I thought this was a good idea, but I'm exhausted today. I'm just not up for the plans that we've made. And if that offends them deeply, that's just not going to be our sweet spot in flowing in the relationship. Likewise, if I have friends that I would say just are really spontaneous and really in the flow, and those are not the people I ask to pick me up at the airport. So if they're, kind of outside of space and time, and who knows what their flow will be on a given day, I'm just not going to have something that I really am going to rely on them to be my pet sitter, to pick me up at the airport, to show up when I rely on them, because they could just be in a flow and I could be scrambling at the last minute to deal with something that I was counting on having some help with. So there's a lot here. Like for me in the shamanic work, it's almost easier to do the baseline level of bringing back people's soul parts and clearing past lives and cleaning up energetic leaks and reweaving their auric field and doing ancestral healing and just all this awesome stuff I have to do. But then when we get to the level of where they're holding judgment or story or grudges or pain, that can be a very hard place to move, and it's really work that we end up doing ourselves. It's great to have facilitation, it's great to have somebody gently and with your permission and consent point out where these things might be showing up. That's one of the sort of occupational hazards of doing Byron Katie work, is you start to get better at seeing your own story, but you get really good at seeing everybody else's story. And if they have not invited you to point that out to them, that's just, it's not wise to go there. It seldom goes well. So there can be facilitation, but this is a lot of work that you can really do that just creates the space for these deep healings to ripple through and really puts you in touch with your life purpose and your passion and your vitality and your unique expression and whatever part of you is passionate and in love with being here in the world. And so I wanted to just share some things that I find particularly supportive, because I know that that this kind of healing can be really uncomfortable. You know, we say the path of lightning, it's not the path of comfort, because things happen so fast. And so if you clean up a soul wound, you may find that a bunch of your friends change out, because this group of souls was all drawn together on some level to work with some particular issue. And if you clean it up and you no longer resonate and your life energy is no longer going toward, you know, dealing with power struggles and that sort of enmeshed environment at work, it may just flow that it's time for you to flow into another job, because those are no longer your lessons. You've cleaned them up very, very quickly. And so having practices that can support you and allow you to take really good care of yourself along a path of accelerated change can be really helpful. So thank you so much for your time. Again, this all applies whether you're doing shamanic healing or really in any kind of healing movement in whatever way that this may come up for you. Again, my name is Katie Weatherup, and you can learn more about my work at my website, which is handsoverheart.com.